Good morning, everyone. All right, hey, can y'all quiet down a little bit in the back? I can't hear myself talk. All right, very excited to be with y'all today to talk about vibe coding. In fact, specifically debugging vibe code. As they mentioned, my name is Mikhail Kozorovitskiy. I used to be a co-organizer of Base and DevOps Days Birmingham. Now I'm just a DevOps engineer at Solidigm, and they did not approve this talk. So just want to point that out there. And if you're anything like me and have been doing software development for a while, when you think of vibe coding, you think it's stupid. But you know what? Kids these days, they're into vibe coding, and just like our parents thought what we were doing is stupid, we are now the old people. So we're going to take a serious look at what is vibe coding and how we work with it. So before we do that, though, we have to define what vibe coding is. It's a hot term, but everyone defines it different. And ChatGPT, it defines it as a aesthetic-driven experimental coding, where you don't really care about how the structure is, and it's about having fun and going with the flow. And if this is how you vibe code, you're going to have a bad time. So I went to Merriam-Webster, and they define it very similarly. In vibe coding, the coder doesn't need to understand how or why the code works, and it will often accept a certain number of bugs and glitches will be present. This is okay for prototyping, but if you actually want to use your product, you're going to have a bad time. So what I found was Andrew NG, sorry. NG? Andrew. Andrew has the best definition for this, and I took this from his X account. It's a practice where we focus more on architecture and features as opposed to the code. And that's okay, that makes you think. But the second part of his explanation, I think, is better. Because to effectively vibe code, you still have to know what you're doing. You know, if you do understand what you're doing and you take the steps to, sorry guys, I drove about 10 hours and then had like 5 cups of coffee. So yeah, if you know what you're doing, your vibe coding is going to be a lot better. Because you can't really prompt your way to production without understanding what you're doing. And if you try, you're going to have a bad time. So this is my example of lazy vibe coding. You prompt AI, your code appears, you run it, and that's really your prototype. And that works to get you maybe funding. That works to see if the app has legs, if you have product market fit. But the reality is if you want to maintain that code, and this is how you do it, you're going to have a very hard time after you deploy the code. Anytime you have bugs, it's just very difficult to debug something you don't understand. You wouldn't go fix your car unless you understand how to work on it. Same thing with this. You really have to understand software development. Because if you're doing it the lazy way, you can just throw out your vibe code. There's no way you're going to be able to modify it and fix it when it goes wrong. What I take lessons from is like classic software development lifecycle. And classic because this is pre-AI, right? We gather our requirements, we do a design, wireframes, and then we write the code. We test it, or we flip those two, right? And we write our tests first, if we're really good, and do test-driven development, and then we write the code. And then we deploy it, and we can maintain it and change it because there is some kind of institutional knowledge of what we're doing. And so you can apply this same type of technique when you're doing vibe coding. So you prompt AI for specific requirements. And I mean like technical requirements. So you still have to break down these steps. You create the wireframes with AI's help by prompting it. You create the coding pieces with AI. You ask it how to run the code. You have it write your tests. But the whole time you have to review and understand what is going on. So then you prompt it for deployment instructions, and you can also prompt for changes. This last piece gets really difficult because AI has a hard time with being able to recreate things without losing pieces of context, pieces of specifics. And we'll get into that here in a second. But the key is to structure your relationship with AI that is more than just outsourcing your understanding, your thinking. Because AI is really bad at certain things. It hallucinates. It doesn't really have a full overview of the system. I mean, it will understand what you put into it, but it will still ignore specifics. I can't tell you the number of times AI has told me, hey, you can do this code in Ansible, and then you're like, but I just read the documentation, and that is not valid. And then you run it, and you're like, yeah, that's not valid. And then AI is like, oh, you're right. That's not valid. Thanks, AI. Because it wants to please you. It wants to make you happy, and it will sacrifice quality and reality to please you. And this is true with ChatGPT, with GitHub Code, I'm sure others, but those are just the two. GitHub Copilot. Those are just the two that I've had experience with. Because AI, at this point, is at best a junior developer. So, because of the things I mentioned before, it doesn't understand logic. It makes mistakes confidently, just like me. It often lacks the context, but it is really good at building stuff, like building your code, building your wireframes, as long as you don't expect too much from it. Because in the end, you have to be the senior developer. You have to be the captain to guide it, to review it, to validate it, to integrate. And sometimes you have to read the manual. That is me, by the way, back when I was young. So now we can get to like the specifics of debugging vibe code. And by the way, if you're doing lazy vibe coding, you can just leave. Because we can't really help you. You should hire a professional. But if you're willing to learn, AI is great at helping you improve in steps. At first, you have it, you have it write your prompt for you, and then the next time you can understand some more of it. You can ask it for explanations, and I always do this. I read the explanations it gives me for why it does things. The only time that messes up is when it hallucinates and it's like, hey, this is why we have this specific feature, and then you're like, but this feature doesn't exist. So you always have to be able to check it. So to actually debug code that was written with the help of a computer, we want to apply the same principles that we apply in DevOps and software engineering. The first one is shift left. And I don't mean just like move to the left. But those of you in DevOps will be familiar with this term. It really means just getting the feedback as fast as possible. So running your code in your IDE, running your tests in the IDE, deploying and being able to run automated tests on it so that you get feedback right away if something doesn't work. Because the faster you get that feedback, the quicker you can fix it or have AI fix it for you. Second thing is work in small chunks. This is another principle of DevOps and Kaizen and all the way back to like TPS and other continuous improvement frameworks. But you work in small chunks. So instead of like prompting, hey AI, write me an application that takes user data and sends it into a database, have it write the form object, have it write the API, have it write the model that it stores in the database, and do those separately. Because you'll be able to do two things. You'll be able to fix the individual component as opposed to have to re-prompt for the entire thing, which, as I mentioned before, might miss specifics. Right? It will just ignore certain variables sometimes. Write tests. Like, don't underestimate the power of testing. This is not just like old school software development. Whether you're writing the code, AI is writing the code, someone should be writing tests. Because without testing, you don't really know if it works. And when your code eventually gets to production, you'll want those automated so that you can know when your service is down, when there are issues. Anyway, it's part of software development. Use version control. I think we've gone backwards in software development with AI. We're creating stuff and we're just putting it out there, and we're not using the tools that have been developed over like the last 30 plus years. One of them is version control. Who here doesn't use version control? Okay, cool. I'm not going to harp on that. Excellent. Output your logs. Runtime debugging, super important, whether it's JavaScript or Python or your Terraform code. You want to understand what's failing and then ask AI to fix it. Okay, so a little more into shift left. Small units of testable code with the goal of quickest feedback possible. And then run, prompt, run, refine. But I keep harping on this because the most important thing is that you have to understand what the code does. You really have, even though you're having AI write the code for you, you still have to be a software engineer in order to be able to debug it. Have it write tests. Use coding agents that are geared for coding. This will help with some of the issues I talked about: hallucinations, missing specifics, Claude Code, GitHub Copilot, Replete. I think Windsurf does some of that as well, but I haven't used that. And then submit your logs, error codes to the agent. And when in doubt, read the code and read the manual. And as a last resort, ask somebody else. Base is a great organization to do that with. Come out to All Your Base Belong to Us drinking/dinner meetup and ask your questions, because they're real humans that will help you. Yeah. So keys, I keep restating this, but you can't just prompt. You have to understand what you're doing. When you prompt, you're creating prototypes, and you really should not ship those until you understand what's in there. I took a little survey because this was supposed to be about a 5-minute lightning talk. Thanks, Ed and Michael. But when it became a serious talk, I wanted to understand how people are using AI other than me, because my ChatGPT has, I think, at least 200 or 300 questions, and now I'm using their little folders, which are sweet, but I have all this back data. So that's just me. I don't know. I didn't know before this how other people were using it, but it turns out pretty much everyone uses ChatGPT. Most people use VS Code. Claude is like the second most popular model. People use Copilot, Cursor, and Replete as well for everything from prototypes, debugging, to the actual code generation. So I found this kind of interesting. I asked just, what's your feedback on AI? And one of the answers was, I stop when the vibes break. AI lacks the MacGyver gene, and it's just not good. LOL. I thought that was my favorite. And in the closing thoughts, if you vibe, verify. Don't outsource your judgment. Remember that AI is a pattern engine. It can only regurgitate. It can't create new stuff. And you're the creative genius, so act like it. Thank y'all. That's my talk, but I'd like to take a moment, since we have about 7 minutes, to talk to you about hallucinations. And I'd love to know what your worst hallucination is. I'll let you know what my worst hallucination I've had was. So I'll start it. Oh, all right. See you. Can I have this mic? Oh. So my worst hallucination is AI told me to submit a ticket as a response to my submitted ticket. It's like, thanks, guy. And then when I submitted negative feedback, it closed my ticket. So, Steve?
So I won't get down to the dollar value, but since January, I've been using ChatGPT to write Excel macros and learning options trading. And I've made about $60,000 since
Nice.
January. But I've had dozens of examples where it tells me bad financial things or writes a macro that like double counts something or whatever. So I have to watch it like a hawk and make sure, like, wait a minute, that can't be right. You're double counting something. If anybody was getting that kind of return, everybody would be doing this. You've got to watch it, but when it works, it's amazing.
Good. I think there's a gentleman in the back.
So I use Cloud Code a lot, and I used it to try and refactor a project to TypeScript strict. And I actually was sharing this in on our Slack at work, but as I was going through it, I would argue with it because it just wasn't doing the right things, or where we do a lot of Svelte, and so it would bring in Svelte 4 syntax instead of Svelte 5, and then I would tell it we need Svelte 5, and it says, yes, you're absolutely right. I'm going to do that. And it's like, no, that's still Svelte 4, and he's like, you're absolutely right. And so then I said, forget it. Forget the Svelte 5 syntax. Let's just keep on with the TS refactor. And it goes, let me create a comprehensive, I screenshot it, let me create a comprehensive fix by adding proper types to the most problematic files. Since this is taking too long, though, because it has to keep thinking, it's like, let me just add TS no check to all the files. So that's what it did. And I said, no, that's not what I want to do. Just do one of the files and go, okay, you're absolutely right. I need to, well, there was something else I didn't screenshot that, but it's like, yeah, I'm not going to take the shortcut. So then it just ended up adding any to all the types, and I just said, I can't remember I think I just gave up at that point, but it just would not work. So
Do you think that you could have done that differently to avoid that kind of generalization from Claude?
Well, I think, I was pretty specific in what I wanted it to do, but I think maybe I could have prompted it better. I'm not sure. And I just added an agents MD file to help prevent that kind of thing now, and maybe it's a little bit better, but this was just me like trying to speed through something, and I prompted it pretty specific. I gave it context, and I think it was just taking too long. Maybe I needed to break it down, like to your point, to just, hey, let's just focus on this file. But I wanted to give it all the context of the code base. It wasn't a huge code base to do that. But I think just breaking it down into smaller chunks probably would have been a little bit better.
It really does, because it does ignore specifics, especially the larger the data set you give it, the more it ignores. And I don't exactly know why that is, but it's where we are right now. Maybe in a few years we'll get to a better level. But anyone else want to share their AI stories?
All over this corner.
Their worst AI story, sorry.
Yeah, so I was trying out a infrastructure as code tool. I won't mention the name. This was a couple years ago, or a year ago. And I was trying to add a certificate to a resource that I was creating, and it gave me the code. By the way, this tool, all of its documentation is AI generated. You ask it a question. I worked so hard to figure out why I couldn't add that certificate until I got down to the actual source code. And once I got out of AI and looked at the actual source code, turns out it didn't even exist. So that was a fun day.
Yep. So it hallucinates, it ignores specifics. So break down your code when you're talking. Break down your requirements to as small as manageable chunks as possible. Does anyone else want to? If not, well, excellent.
Okay, so I've got two. So one of the things that we've been doing lately is got to do a lot with working with 64-bit binary. And so one of my developers was trying to see if the integer that was being generated matched the 64-bit binary. So she was throwing the number in there, seeing if it matched. And it's saying, no, it doesn't match. over and over again. And so she calls me. She's about in tears after about 6 hours trying to figure out why her math isn't right. And I was like, did you run it through an actual calculator and check it? And she's like, no. I was like, do that. And I was like, it was right. And so she said something to ChatGPT. It says, this isn't right. And he goes, oh, yeah, you're right. This is. And then the other thing it's really bad about is just making up system procedures that are supposed to exist and going, use this. Or that's not a thing. And they go, oh, yeah, you're right. Use this instead, referencing the exact same thing it just said to use that wasn't there. So those are the kinds of things that'll just bite somebody in the butt if they're not careful.
So let me ask a general question. Who here has gotten one of those, oh yeah, you're right, from ChatGPT? Yeah, so you got to be careful with it. All right, well, if there's nothing else, well, okay, I want to do one more thing. Okay, that's it. Y'all have a great day. Thank you.